Episode number 144, Making a Case, the rise and the dysfunction of the podcast. Let's talk about it. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Making a Case. We're on episode number 144. Glad you can make it back. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. Jacob Isom. We got two channel norms over here. One, we attack points in our people, and two, we'll do all the cussing and derogatory stuff. We like to keep it professional, all right? Today's episode, we're talking about the rise and the dysfunction of the podcast. Now, I know you probably thought I was going to say rise and fall. I don't think the podcast, as it is, has failed as of yet. Actually, I think it's going to continue to climb until we get to a point where, we'll be looking for a new medium to consume information. But right now, as we speak, the podcast game is popping, right? Because anybody with a microphone could have something to say. But that's part of the dysfunction, all right? And we're going to get into it in this episode. But we know the podcast game has kind of started in the early 2000s, and here we are in 2025, and it's exploded, and it's better than it ever had been before. Before I continue, I apologize. How rude of me. I hope you had a nice holiday, and I hope you continue to have a nice holiday because, New Year's is coming up. And we're actually in the celebration of Kwanzaa. So happy holidays to you. All right. But going back to what we're talking about. But yes, when we talk about the podcast game, I mean, technically you can consider this a podcast. I think the podcast and the YouTube have merged, right? And now the podcast is in video form. But before that, we know the podcast was just, audio, right? Which I did start in that realm a long time ago, and I kind of switched to YouTube. So I'm one of the people that kind of switched over as well. But yeah, the podcast is alive and well, but I will say this, and the reason why I'm making the case that it's the rise and dysfunction is because, like I said, anybody with a microphone can talk, right? Can be influential, which is why they call it influencers, right? So anybody can be talking to your kids because we know that kids actually listen to podcasts, kids listen to music and things of that nature, right? And so there's a lot of misinformation and people who are not credentialed and people who are just spreading plain garbage, right? I think that is the dysfunctional part about the podcast world. Because anybody can get into it. It don't cost you much. All you need is time. All right. So I got a couple of clips that's going to talk about the rise, as well as a little bit of dysfunction, or kind of how we have, of course, when we monetize the podcast game, that also comes with the downside of it. All right. So I got a couple of clips that I want to show you, and we're going to get into it. The podcast, the rise, and the dysfunction of it. Okay? All right, without further ado, let's get into it.
4-year-olds listen and watch podcasts more than television now.
Yep.
Wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of crazy.
So, and so when you do the math, you can kind of follow that down. What they're doing now is, what 18-year-olds doing now, they're going to continue to do. It's going to evolve, that genie isn't going back in the bottle.
No.
Like they're not going to, there might be new mediums that come out.
And they might listen to different shows.
Yes. But they're being raised and brought up in media around as podcasting being a top source of content, entertainment, education. 18
And to me, that is so crazy. I don't know if you heard the first part. He said 18 to 4-year-olds watch podcasts more than they watch TV, right? Which is not surprising, right? Particularly that age group, because a lot of times they're on the move or they're at a friend's house and things of that nature, right? So they're not sitting down watching series and movies together. They're watching very short clips of 30-minute segments of things because and I think that's the advantage that podcasts have, right? It's more segmented, right? So you can go to a specific clip and get information. But it's also scary because, and the reason why they drug um, a lot of these red pillars or a lot of these people that have podcasts or that's on YouTube and online because, like, they're spewing certain things that is controversial that people really don't want to get that you're not going to hear in a TV series or a movie. I tell you that, right? Which is another reason that led to the rise of podcasts because people are unapologetically saying how they feel and what they want to say, right? But the only problem with that is some of it is pretty dangerous rhetoric, right? Not only what is being said about men, but what is being said about women, the gender war that is going on, and what's being said in politics and um, transgenderism, and I mean, just a whole host of things, right? Um, when you get young, impressionable people listening to that stuff and then they regurgitating it, I mean, this leads to, a lot of dysfunction, if you ask me. Okay. The next clip that I have for you is going to go in a little bit more detail in another direction, but I'll just let you check it out.
Ever since the pandemic, that absolutely everyone you've ever met has now got a podcast. And this, it's not even plugged into anything. But there is a big problem on the horizon that we're already starting to experience. Follow me. Now, you're probably like, what were you filming then? Is it too much to ask to keep the camera on me? Now, problem number one is if you're like me, I like listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. So when he went over to Spotify, we celebrated it. And we were happy to pay that Spotify membership. But then for some reason, although we're paying Spotify the money, he's still putting ads in the podcast. So I'm there in bed listening to an episode, about to fall asleep. And then bam.
This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens.
You're like, whoa. So you're like, hold on, I'm paying you Spotify so I don't get ads. And now I'm getting ads either way. And they don't even play them at the beginning like Lex Friedman so you can skip through them and pretend you listen to them. They put them, bam. Come on, over here, come on. For many of you, you've probably heard of a podcast called Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. And congratulations, they just hit 5 million subscribers on YouTube, which is amazing. But there's a lot of controversy between the guests at the moment, and all the guests seem to contradict each other and say different things, but they're all renowned experts. But being an expert isn't merely enough, because if you think about it, if two companies are suing each other, both companies will have experts, and those both experts in the same field would disagree with each other. Just making someone an expert doesn't mean they're right, or you wouldn't have people on different sides. And there are several components to operating a podcast.
And that's a great point, which is kind of leads to the dysfunction of the podcast, right? When you have, I mean, even when you look at the panels, right? I'm pretty sure you've seen on YouTube, right? And they have different people on there. And a lot of times the panels don't have a lot of experts on them. But you'll hear difference of opinion, which is kind of, they want that, right? For entertainment purposes, for debate purposes, right? But then when people start bringing up stats and data and stuff like that, and it's conflicting. So the problem is now you don't know who to believe, right? And which is the reason why I don't like to call myself an expert. I like to call myself a specialist because it's something that I literally specialize in because that is where I do a lot of my research in, which for me would be relationships and education. Okay. But I think we kind of understand why people do call themselves experts, but at the end of the day, sometimes it can backfire, particularly when you get people that are on the same podcast, but are delivering different information that conflicts and go against things. So I think that's a great point that he brought up. Let's continue.
In 2024 that people aren't thinking about. Podcasts are businesses. They are not vessels or means of getting you free information, although it may feel that way. Places like YouTube will pay you AdSense, but when you start looking at these podcasts as businesses, this is only a fraction, maybe 10 to 20% of what that business is earning is being paid for by Google. One of the main places you will earn money in a podcast is sponsors. And the sponsor will pay depending on the amount of downloads or the amount of views, because you are putting eyes and ears in front of their brand. Podcasts also use discount codes, but they're not discount codes, they're commission codes. When you look at Huberman promoting Athletic Greens, if you use this code for the discount, it actually allows Athletic Greens to understand where they're giving their commission to. And if we use Athletic Greens as an example, you're not only looking at $50 commission per sale, but every sale thereon in. So no doubt, a sponsor will not just pay the person to be mentioned, they will then pay the person every time there's commission on their product and sales on therein. So when the likes of Huberman are saying Athletic Greens is really good and it makes them feel so much better, they're not just looking at commission, they're looking at recurring commission. Now, what makes things interesting? So if we look at a company like Huel, Stephen Bartlett is a non-executive director of Huel, which I assume means he has shares in the business. So although I'm sure that Huel pay Dario, the CEO, money, every time Stephen Bartlett mentions Huel, he's also inflating the portfolio of a business that he's got shares in. And before I say, that's terrible, I do that every time I tell you about Nutonic, the world's first productivity drinks. Oh, my shares in the business just went up. So far, nothing really is wrong with this picture. The problem starts becoming apparent when you start looking at guests. In the beginning, you want fantastic guests who can arrive and change people's lives and give people so much information and get massive amounts of views and grow your channel to 5 million subscribers. But you will exhaust the amount of great guests very soon. And you can get those guests back on, or what we're starting to see is you bring on guests not who are known for being factually correct or objective, but that you know will cause controversy, cause a rift between the followers, cause massive amounts of engagement, cause people to be so outraged that they go and watch the podcast just to see what's factually incorrect in it, and of course, get huge amounts of views. You'll even notice.
And I stopped the video right there because that's really where I want to touch on when it comes to the dysfunction, or really when it comes to both the rise and the dysfunction, right? The business breakdown we're talking about, everybody understands that that's not a bad thing because everybody's in it to make money. If you're doing this podcasting thing, if you're putting a lot of money in it, a lot of time, and a lot of effort, everybody wants to make money, right? So it's no different than when you're talking about TV, movie, and anything else, right? So that's not dysfunctional. That's just the business. That's just the way it is. The rise and the dysfunction of the podcast is controversy, right? Drama, negativity. It sells. It helps, right? And when I say it helps, I mean that it helps build brands. It helps build sponsorship. It helps, depending on how controversial you are, right? If you're someone like a Charleston White, then you might want to run. No disrespect. But we all understand how controversial Charleston White is. So now when I look at podcasts on YouTube, all I see is people that want to say some shocking things or want to act in a certain way to be controversial, to boost their subscribers and to boost their viewerships so then that they can make more money. And I think that is the problem, right? In order to make more money, these podcasts feel like they have to do something super controversial or super ridiculous to get them more attention. Okay. And I think that is the problem. And what I would say for myself, I'm sorry, I can't sell out. I can't sell my soul for that. Right. But what I am going to give you, I'm going to give you information. I'm going to give you different perspectives. Okay. And I'm going to make you think. Okay. And hopefully, just hopefully, that's good enough. All right. And on that note, we're going to end today's episode, man. As always, y'all know I appreciate y'all rocking with me, man. Tell me what you think about the rise and the dysfunction of the podcast. Do you think it's dysfunctional? Do you think podcasts are great? How often do you watch podcasts? Okay. Let me know in the comments. But as always, I'm you or me. Love always, love return. Remember, the worst thing you do is lie to yourself. And we out. Deuces. One love.